I just finished reading Virginia Evans' The Correspondent, which is the sleeper debut bestseller that everybody's been talking about. And in this video, I am going to talk about how the book delivers a love letter, pun intended, to deliberate, thoughtful communication, and how writing letters can do that for us. It's an epistolary novel, which means that everything we see are letters. There's nothing else. Jane Austen has Lady Susan. I don't know if you guys have read that. That's a really fun epistolary novel. And of course, Dracula is also one in which you're getting to experience the world as told by these characters to each other. It's really fun. And in the book, it's not a complete back and forth. So sometimes Sybil, our correspondent protagonist, will send a letter and it won't be till like 5 letters later that she will hear back from that particular person. But it makes for a masterclass in what it's like to really think about what you're saying and who you're saying it to, and be very careful, not necessarily in expressing your feelings and hiding things, but in saying them exactly in the way that that particular person needs. It's a beautiful form of love that gets shown in this book. This is her debut. She wrote 7 novels unpublished before this, and she was about to go to law school and just completely give up, and COVID arrived, and then I think a lot of us were ready to give up during COVID. So she was like, you know what, I'm just gonna write this for myself. Screw it, I don't care. And that sort of act of writing for herself allowed her to write this book. And it's a sleeper bestseller. It just kept growing because people were such big fans. It came out in April 2025, and here we are, April 2026, a year later, still in awe of this beautiful, beautiful novel. We follow the protagonist of The Correspondent for almost 10 years, from 2012 to 2022. She is a retired lawyer who had 3 kids, and one of them, her middle boy, died. She had a husband, but as a fallout from that death, she is now divorced. And she had a brilliant career that she was very proud of as a lawyer and law clerk for a judge, but now she's retired. She's beginning to lose her sight, and that is a big problem for her because as life has wounded her, her way to survive has been to have these sometimes decades-long relationships with people through letters. And of course, if she loses her eyesight, it's going to be really, really hard to write letters. This is a character who has come up with a way to still be in the world without being in it. She's in her house, and yet she has these beautiful relationships with friends and writers. And Patchett and Joan Didion, she started writing to them a long, long time ago, and they write back, and we get to see the ways in which they communicate. And Patchett loved the novel, by the way. Joan Didion did not live to see it, so who knows what she would have thought about it. I bet you she would have loved it. But one of the arguments that the novel makes is that for those who have been wounded, there's a lot of power and a lot of love to be gained by sitting down and really thinking about what it is that you want to say to the people you want to keep in your life. She ends up keeping the people who will write back with the same kind of care, but it's a crutch she has found that is really meaningful. And as we find ourselves texting and finding our own crutches for being with people, This one is at least much more thorough in what one can say, and it requires a lot of thinking. It's handwritten. There's a lot of effort and tactile connection that you put into a letter. And I hope, being somebody who has written many, many letters in her life, that it sparks a lot of letter writing relationships. The correspondent examines the possibilities of writing letters in order to connect. What do they give us? But also, are there limits to what they can offer? And when it comes to friendship, I would argue the book makes a really strong case for why letters can be an immense and valuable building block. One of my favorite relationships in the book, it's between Sybil and Rosalie, who has been her friend since they were kids. They would write letters to each other when they were away for the summer, and that became a way for them to develop a connection that would survive what often happens to kids. You get married, you move away, you go to college, all of these things happen, and then the people that you used to visit just by walking to their house are no longer there for you. You guys are in completely different places. And in this case, Rosalie marries the brother of Sybil's husband, which you'd think would bring them closer together, but they end up living in different continents. So these letters are a way for them to go back to that initial bond that they had as girls, but also to keep track of each other's lives. They tell each other what they're reading and what they're thinking about their books, and then they catch each other up on whatever's happening in their lives. And at some point in the book, as Sybil's losing her sight and she's starting to really think about her mortality and the end of things, she sends Rosalie all these letters from decades ago. And you realize, wow, friendship, if it lasts for many, many decades, which many of my friendships have, and I hope they will continue to, is something that we start to forget. It's something that there's so much that we've walked together that how could we possibly remember it all? And yet here is their friendship in physical form. And she's able to just like package it and send it. And it's something that photos cannot do. I love photos, but photos are literally a snapshot of a moment, whereas these letters have so much richness and so much more. There are, however, limitations to what letters can do. At some point, they end up getting into an argument around Sybil's daughter that Sybil has a really difficult relationship with. And it's one of those where if they had been in the same room and they had seen each other's reactions, it might have gone differently. But because it's just in writing and you can't see this person that you love so much being hurt by what you're saying, it ends up creating all sorts of friction, and they don't have that much time left. So losing months with your best friend when you're in your 70s, it's very different from when you're in your teens. Still, the novel makes a beautiful argument for the value of letters as the record keepers and the bond for decade-long friendships when you live away from the people who are your best friends. The correspondent analyzes the kinds of relationships we can have over letter writing, and it delivers sort of an evaluation of which ones work better and which ones don't. And parenting is a tough one. Sybil has 2 living kids. She has Bruce, her son, and there aren't a lot of letters to Bruce because Bruce lives in the US and because they have a good relationship and they see each other. So ideally, one would be able to relate to one's kids in person. That is a much easier relationship for parenting and grandparenting their grandchildren. That's what one hopes. I certainly hope when my children grow up that we'll be able to see each other in person. However, Sybil's daughter Fiona lives in Europe, and not only are they geographically apart, they're also emotionally apart. And here's where we start to see just how limited this kind of relationship can be with certain people, such as your child that you haven't been close to since she was a kid. And Fiona writes emails, and it's a different form of communication. This is not the only person that Sybil emails with, but emails don't have the same level of thought going into them. Oh my God, now AI tells you what to do with them and how to cut them. They didn't in 2022 when the book ends, but there's just a slight difference between sitting down to write a letter and writing an email. And we see Sybil telling her best friend Rosalie all the ways in which she's interpreting Fiona's emails, and I'm sitting there going like, no, I don't think, no, you're not reading that right. But their hurt is so present and so big that she just can't give this daughter of hers the benefit of the doubt. She's always going to turn toward the worst version of things. And here's an example of a place where letter writing or email writing for a wounded mother and daughter does not work. For the vast majority of the book, it does not work. And then, of course, as often happens in fiction and real life, in my experience, there's an explosion, and the explosion is big. And of course, we hear about it through letters, and that causes Sybil to finally write a letter to Fiona where she comes clean about their relationship. And that one is a letter, and it is deliberate. And this format that Sybil has mastered as a way to really say what she means and to really listen to the needs of the other person is finally applied to the person in her life that needs it the most, who is her daughter. And it's such a beautiful moment of atonement and seeing and recognition of time lost, but also hope for the time they have left. It is a masterclass in what letters can actually do, even though for a very long time they were the thing that kept them from dealing with the things they needed to deal with. And we hope that from now on, Fiona will be like Bruce, and they'll see each other in person and have the relationship that parents and children should have. One of the worst fears of any parent, certainly this parent, is that your children would die. It's the worst thing that can happen to a parent. And it happened to Sybil. Her little boy Gilbert died when he was 10, and he died during a swimming accident. And it's something that has marked her life ever since. It upended her marriage, as the deaths of children often do. And it also just upended their family. Their family split across continents. And throughout the book, she has been writing this letter to somebody named Colt, as in baby horse. And it's an unfinished letter. And as I was reading it, I was like, this is definitely her child. That is who she's writing to. And yes, it is. It's her most unvarnished writing. It's her most honest, loving, open writing. It's the writing where she searches into her soul the most. It's a question that we ask ourselves as we think about the biggest tragedy that could happen to you. Where does that child go? Do they just disappear? Or depending on your believes, maybe if you're religious, you feel like they went to heaven, or there's all sorts of thoughts that we have, and none of us have the answer. We might have faith that we know the answer, but the answer always takes a leap of faith, because we in fact don't know where we go after we die. Nobody knows. And after a child dies, it feels like they didn't get to finish their life, and it feels unfair. The way that it plays in the book, at least for me, is that Gilbert goes into her soul. He goes into her. And through this unfinished letter that she's been writing for decades, that is where he is. He lives within this paper. He lives within the relationship that these two people have. And it's beautiful. It's one of the most healing parts of the book. And you think, well, if I lost a child or somebody I deeply loved, it doesn't have to be a child. Maybe this is a way that I could keep growing with them, and that it's not even keeping his memory alive, though partially is that she's keeping their relationship alive by continuing to speak to him, even though as she grows older, he forever remains a child. It's one of the most powerful and moving elements of the novel, and it opens up ways for us to think about how we mourn and how we relate to those who are gone. Divorce is hard, famously, and a divorce that happens after the death of a child has got to be, if not harder, at least certainly as hard as some of the more difficult divorces. And in The Correspondent, these two people who used to love each other, Sybil and Dan, split up that way, and because he moved to Europe, then they really split up, continents apart. And he is dying. He has remarried. He has what seems like a good life. He writes her a letter of goodbye and says, look, I always loved you and I'm grateful to you. It's a beautiful, beautiful letter. And he says, if you can, please write me back. And time goes by. He dies, and she doesn't make it to the funeral. She wanted to, but she just couldn't do it. And then the last thing we see in the book is this letter that she tried to write to him. And every letter we've seen in the book is brilliant and pristine. And here we have this inarticulate thing scratched out, revisited sentences. It's a mess. She just couldn't express her guilt, her remorse, her loss to this man, even though this is how she has mastered the art of engaging with others. That was the one letter that she couldn't write. It's a very vulnerable, beautiful ending that gives us the sense that there were some wounds that not even letters could heal. But she led a brilliant, incredible, unwounded life despite it. And I think with our protagonists, we want them to be happy and be well, but we also relate to them, particularly in those moments where we see the breaks that will never mend, because we all have breaks that will never mend. And when we watch them continue to go through life with those breaks, it gives us hope that we can too. As Sybil's life evolves and begins to draw to a close, we start to see that because her vision takes away her ability to write as much as she used to, she is suddenly forced to start relating to people face to face. One of the fan favorites is Theodore, her neighbor, with whom over the 10 years of the book, she goes into a slow burn romance that ends up in a full-fledged romance. And it's wonderful to see her take everything that she learned from communicating with others with care and asking questions of them and answering their questions from her practice of letter writing. And then we imagine, because we don't see those interactions, put it into real life. We know that she is finally able to communicate with people because all of these relationships are flourishing as the book comes to an end. If Sybil could have her cake and eat it too, which I think she does, she finally figures out how to have these beautiful in-person connections, but then she also gets to have what was so meaningful to her from the start, which are these traces of love and arguments and disagreements and wonderment that are left behind in paper form of all of these relationships across the world. That was something she always deeply valued as her legacy, more than what she did at work, maybe even more than what she did as a mother. She was really interested in the physicality of her thoughts and her relationships as held by the thousands of letters she wrote. And yet, the book does not trap her within those letters. It also gives her the world outside them at the end. So even though it's a book that's really full of heartbreak, it's also a book that's full of hope and possibility, and it gives the rest of us a lot of ideas for how we too can have our cake and eat it too. Thank you so much for watching this video about The Correspondent. Tell me, have you read it? Have you not? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts on it? What were your favorite letters and relationships in this beautiful, beautiful book? And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, share, and stay big-hearted.